Another thing that I've realized in hindsight for all the younger guys and girls out there trying to get into business, the most important thing you can do is get really good at anything you're interested in and everything you're interested in. Go deep, try things, and just get good at stuff. Because if you're not really good at something, there's someone else who probably is, and they're going to understand value propositions way better than you will.
Welcome to the SCL podcast, filmed in the MD Acoustics anechoic chamber at their testing facility in beautiful Gilbert, Arizona. Each episode, we bring you compelling conversations, practical advice, and illuminating stories from the minds of industry leaders, educators, innovators, and visionaries who are shaping the world one idea at a time. In today's episode, we are joined by Roald Dietzman, the president of Fast DMS. Fast DMS delivers professional-grade parts as fast as the same day. This is possible through his commitment to improving manufacturing workflows and implementing cutting-edge fabrication methods. As a jack of all trades, Roald combines technical expertise and entrepreneurial drive to streamline processes and foster efficiencies across a multitude of industries.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to SCL Podcast. I'm Jordan Trubakoff. This is Mike Dickerson, and we're joined here today with Roald Dietzman. Initially, your background, though, mechanical engineering.
Yes, sir.
And that's from Washington?
Yes, sir. Yep. Born and raised in Washington in the Northwest. And I went to school for mechanical engineering, got out of mechanical engineering school, went to work as a mechanical engineer. And during that time, I self-educated myself on business. I'm not saying it's good education or bad education, but it was something. And all that was with the plan of eventually starting a business once I figured out what the value proposition was that I wanted to work on.
Right. So, and I don't know, kind of jumping the gun a little bit, I suppose, but have you learned a lot more in terms of, because you can read from a book on
Always.
right? But until you start failing or succeeding and taking risks, that's kind of when it's like, oh, there's a real lesson.
Yeah, exactly. I think books teach you a lot of great lessons, and they can get you started on the right path. And there's a few that I have that I think of still to this day. And I'm thankful for those books because I haven't had to learn some of those lessons. One of my favorite lessons, I'm just going to say it because I think everyone should hear it. It's a framework for your business model, and it's from an author named MJ DeMarco. He has a book that's titled The Millionaire Fast Lane. I'm not exactly sure if I like the title or not, but he did the A/B testing, and that's what won. And so, kudos for finding a winning title there. But his great insight was the business model needs to follow this acronym, NECST. So your business, there needs to be a need for it. It can't be something that you're just like, man, I would really like to have this myself. There has to be an actual need in a marketplace for it. So that's a fairly obvious one. The E is barrier to entry, which means that the business needs to be difficult to start. Because if it's not difficult to start, like podcasting, like we were talking before we were rolling here,
Right.
Anyone can get their own podcasting. This is different. Anyone can get their own podcast and put something up on YouTube. The barrier to entry is very low there for someone to get started. But if you were to be an automaker, I think the classic example, or make spaceships like SpaceX or Tesla,
Right.
Those are very high barrier to entry companies to start. You just, by the nature of the difficulty, will not have as much competition. C is control, which means, and is this where we want to be going with this?
I love it.
Okay. C is control, and you need to have control over your business. So if your business is 100% reliant on Google ads or Facebook ads, or it's 100% reliant on, like one machine or something. Let's say you have one 3D printer and your whole business is relying on that one 3D printer. You don't really have control over your business because you have a single point of failure, right? Okay, maybe it's 2 points of failure or something, but the whole idea there is to spread it out. You don't want to have one customer. You don't want to diversify in all aspects of the business. S is it has to be scalable. That one's pretty obvious. And then T is you have to be able to separate your time put into the business from the revenue, if that makes sense. In this example, the like if you had like a lawyer or something, there's a couple different, and I'm not a lawyer, and so there may be some pushback on this, but in my understanding, you can, as a lawyer, basically sell your hours. You have your hourly rate, and then there's some lawyers who have more of a commission-based fee, and the commission-based fee would be the model that is independent of your time put in. You could spend a lot of time and make a bad hourly rate, or you could spend a little bit of time and make a great, equivalent hourly rate. But the point is to disconnect those two, and versus where you put in 1 hour, you get X amount of dollars. So those are the 5 main points that I really, really fell back on. That was one of my favorite lessons ever from any business book, was that business model. Another little point from that one was you need to consider the amount of value you're providing and the amount of times you're providing that value. If you have something that's very high value, you don't have to sell too much of that, right, to have a big business. It's just a simple math equation. And then if you have some small thing like a fidget spinner, you've got to sell millions of those to have a large business. Do you want me to keep going on lessons I've just learned?
Absolutely.
It's good stuff. Yeah. I think here's the thing. I think it's good because mechanical engineering, a lot don't associate business with mechanical engineering, right? And that's part of the podcast. I think, for me personally, melding the two. Yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of times, like mentorship, when people think business, there's just like, oh, I went and got a business degree or finance degree. No knock on that at all. But when you're building something that is widgets, like you're talking about, or design or product or anything, there has to be an engineer somewhere involved. And it's great that the engineers is kind of the, at the head of this, as opposed to just not at the head of this, right? And I can't tell you how many businesses we've worked with in the past where you have somebody that's running that company that isn't an engineer, has no ins and outs, right? No knowledge of the physics. And so anyway, keep going.
Next lesson that I learned, this was early on. I had this idea that someone should take and run with this. But my friend and I, we would do this bike packing, this mountain bike packing. So we'd need really light backpacks, and we'd be out camping because any extra weight you have in your backpack, it's just harder to go uphill. And in hindsight, we were like pushing uphill most of the time anyway, so it didn't really matter as much. But we had the idea that when you sleep, you've got your sleeping bag and your sleeping pad, and you need both of those at minimum. And that doesn't account for any shell or anything like that. But you need both of those at minimum because the sleeping pad insulates you from the cold of the ground. And obviously it's more comfortable, but we weren't concerned about that. It's just the insulation. And the sleeping bag is the insulation on the top, but you also have this insulation on the bottom that's in between you and the sleeping pad that's just compressed. It's not doing as much there. So we thought you could make a half sleeping bag, maybe a 3/4 sleeping bag with a sleeping pad integrated. That we're super, this is the best idea. We're going to get into REI. It's going to be amazing. Such a great business. And then I was having a family dinner at my parents' house, and my dad had one of his friends over, and his friend's daughter was there, and she worked for Techstars at the time. And this was probably 10 or 12 years ago. And I didn't even know what Techstars was or anything. And she was awesome. I can't remember her name or anything. So wherever you are, thank you. But she was, I was telling her about this. She's like, oh, you don't have a business idea. You have a product idea. I was just blown. Right. Because that's so true. You need more than just a product idea to build a business, which is why I'll come back to that fidget spinner idea. That's not a business. That's a product. And you can hawk that a little bit and might work for a little while, but you haven't created a business, an enduring business with a fidget spinner.
Right.
And then the first lesson that I learned myself through trial and error was, so when you're working on a business, when you're going to start, you're doing your reading and everything, the common wisdom is you need to come up with your MVP, your minimum viable product. What do you need to get your business off the ground? What's the minimum thing? And I worked on that, and I did that because our business has some software, and the first thing I ever did with Fast DMS was work on the software. I never used it one time. It just didn't even matter. And I realized, so it's not minimum viable product, it's minimum viable sale. What's your MVS? That's the most important thing, because I wasted months of time, programming and all that, when I should have been learning how to sell, because turns out I really was terrible at that.
Walk me through this though, because so you're an engineer wherever you're at before, and you're prepping yourself, right, to start your own company.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, at one point in your life, you're sitting there thinking, I'm going to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be a business owner. Why?
So, I mean, the appeal, I think, is talked about a lot. The good sides of VMPO. It's like you're your own boss. Which is not true, because you trade one boss for like 1,000 bosses.
That's right.
Or like you're gonna have financial freedom or something, which still working on that. But there's a lot of glorification. I think entrepreneurialism is being sold to us as a very glamorous way to live your life, and I'm sure it is, but I don't think that a person who's truly a good business person is doing it because of their lifestyle. You know what I mean? I would say that I probably work twice as many hours as I would have to if I was working in mechanical engineering. When I was basically sophomore year of college, I was taking Physics 2, Electricity and Magnetism. It was a pivotal class for me, because prior to that, I was could fairly easily get through school without doing homework. It's like, I'm just gonna, this is kind of a joke to me, and I was comfortable with that. So I would just skate by, and I'm like, I know I could do this, but I'm just gonna, be lazy or whatever. And then in that class, me and my buddy took this test midway through the quarter, and both of us did so bad. Like, I think we both scored, like, the test was like 59 points or 61 points or something, and we both got around 10. And we're like, what? I'm confused. Like, this is so bad. And when the professor explained the problems, it's like, these are easy concepts. You just have to practice figuring out the application. I realized that being capable of doing something and actually doing it is a really, really, really big difference. My main motivation is I want to prove to myself that I am actually able to do the thing that I know that I'm capable of, right? And I think business might be the most challenging across the entire pie of being a human.
So what happens though, like what happened, where is that, because you talk about the beach, where, that's not entrepreneurialism. I agree with you 100%, right? Mm-hmm. We've worked together, all of us, on various projects over the last, I don't even know, 5 or 6 years on prototyping stuff we were talking about. Can't talk about it here, but we've worked on a lot of things that are pretty cool. Some of it does change the world, like legitimately changes the world, right? So like for me personally, I love the idea that, as an entrepreneur, you get to decide which projects you get to work on, how you can help improve society and impact people's lives for the better. Personally, like, that's fulfilling to me. Whereas if I was just an engineer working somewhere else, I'd just be, I could do it, no problem. But then it's like, where's the satisfaction in that?
I have more respect than I have ever had in my life for the guy or the gal that just grinds, right? Doing something technical, doing something managerial or leadership. There's a lot of dignity and a lot of pride that you can have with yourself.
Totally.
Going and being a part of a team and making that vehicle for providing value to the world run.
Yeah, you can't do it by yourself. There's no,
right.
Yeah,
right.
That's the other thing, is like, there's no shot, in the Instagram world, maybe there's like, an influencer, but in the real world where you're building stuff or you're doing things, it's a total team effort.
Right.
Absolutely.
And touching on team, so when we initially started working together, which is probably 7, 8 years ago,
You might be right. Yeah.
because I had my business, which is fabrication.
Yep. Love that. I still remember that. Laramie.
Yeah, Laramie.
Welder.
You guys.
Shout out Laramie.
Yeah. Thanks, bud. One of the greatest welders of all time.
Yep.
But initially, when we started working together, your facility, I was blown away between what I knew your guys' facility 7 years ago, whatever, and what I saw a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because in terms of your growth, I think at that point you had, I don't know, a handful of folks.
Yeah.
And now when I came into your new facility, how many people do you have on staff?
It fluctuates between 15 and 20.
Yeah. So significant growth. And in terms of like
Make progress. It's too slow for me.
so you're an entrepreneur.
It pains me thinking, wow, we've only grown that much over, I think it might be like 5 years. Let's call it 4 years.
Failing in business.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you've had failures in business?
Plenty of failures.
And it's one of those things where it's like, once it starts working and you have a formula and it starts working, then you're like, okay, double down.
It's like,
Double down.
where's the next way you can fail?
Exactly. I feel like I'm influenced a lot by software and all the stuff you read on, and like, hey, and I'm not just going to say software is knocking it, but it's like you read this stuff and it's like you got programmers and they build this, XYZ software, and it scales from 0 to, and the thing is like, it doesn't take a tremendous amount of effort in terms of workforce.
I think it does take a lot of effort, but it's a different amount of effort than the projects that we're working on right now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So like one thing to code and just have a whole team of Arsenal data centers and stuff, which is super important. And that is part of the future. It's another thing to actually have your hands on machines, have your hands in building, when I say hardware and widgets, like actual hardware and developing systems like that combined with software is, in my opinion, the hardest thing to do.
Oh yeah.
In terms of business. It doesn't get any harder because you basically have to have groups and teams interfacing all day long, coming together and solving these problems, right?
Yeah.
And so like to me, like when you have a company like you're doing, which we'll talk about a little bit more, just in the travel that you've been doing and all this stuff, and we're no different in that sense. Like it's just tremendously overwhelming when you think about that. We're not even building product. We design and develop,
Right.
but we're not doing actual throughput through our system, through our building,
Yep. Well, and having the communication between the different creative mind, more of an entrepreneurial mind. We have engineers on staff who have a different kind of more logical mind, more math driven. So it's just funny to see these like intersection of disciplines and finding how to communicate between these teams and having the systems in place in order to do that so that the end product is what you promise to deliver. Like anytime I talk to an entrepreneur or someone who's doing something like that, communication is, I mean, that's any relationship, any interpersonal relationship, because
Even you and me.
hey, bud, all right. Yeah. And that's just, I find that so fascinating because business is this like cool microcosm of almost every relationship you've ever had, whether it be love or friends or anything like that. But you almost get this like metric, which is dollars and cents at the end of it, and deadlines where you go, okay, how'd we fail? How did our system screw up, or what can we fix in order to do that? I always found that just so fascinating, like kind of the sociology behind it.
When you're going into business, you have to do what you say you're going to do. And so one of the core values at Fast EMS is we never give up on a project that we work on. Never, ever, because we have to do what we say we're going to do. This has been my challenge this year, trying to not be a part of every project. It's actually been the last 3 years that this has been a challenge. The business can only grow as fast as the leader can grow as a person. And it's felt like this year there's obviously so many keys to and doors to unlock or whatever. But I think I cracked open one door. So you need to be able to have controls over your processes, if that makes sense, if you're not going to do everything yourself. And so the way that Fast EMS started was with just me. So I would talk to the customer, I would do the quoting, I would do all the documentation and the P&L, and then I would write all the purchase orders. I would do all the inspection and do all the packaging and ship to the customer, do that follow-up, and just follow the thing all the way down. Early on, I thought, well, this is great because there's tribal knowledge that you get when you talk to a customer, and not having to communicate that to anybody else to execute on a project.
Right.
It, like, you're able to deliver a more consistent experience to the customer. I struggled with building the team larger than maybe 5-6 guys of the main project managers, because it's not in everybody's wheelhouse to do all those things at the same time, and then do it across 20 projects.
Right.
And
I can relate.
It's, and so what we did a couple months ago was we decided we're going to take that model, that vertically oriented model that I was dogmatic about. We're siloing it into horizontal departments. And there just sounds like
so many commonalities. Yeah. It's just so interesting.
Yeah.
Like,
and so when you have that one department, they can have one KPI and they can focus on providing value in one area. And obviously that area can grow, it can fluctuate depending on the team or what's needed. But you just have you can give people a little bit more focus.
What's KPI?
Key performance indicator.
Okay.
Every person at a company should have a ROC, meaning what is their whole job's performance based on? I was just talking about my sister about this last night. I was like, what is your KPI? And she realized she didn't have a KPI. She didn't know how to perform well at her job. So if you don't have a KPI, you don't know if you're doing well or not. And that was an issue when we were vertically oriented was, right, I remember having discussions with one of my favorite guys about this was how does he know if he's doing a good job or not? And it's like, well, there's 50 different things you have to do. And, there's a little bit in every single one. And it's just too much. It's just too much to execute on properly day in and day out and have controls over. So if you have some guys whose strength is planning and some guys whose strength is execution, and you're trying to have controls over those processes, it's just easier to control a focused team rather than a group of cowboys.
So you can only do that so long before you literally you're exhausted.
Yeah.
For having so many conversations with so many different people and the customer, and you're just going in circles. So that's good. That's great. What made you decide, and this is a good question, I think, like Phoenix, you're coming from Washington, so maybe it's got married or whatever, but Phoenix here company as opposed to California or some other place, close, even Tucson, right? We're close to Mexico for metal. By the way, he deals with a lot of like metalworks,
anything metal or plastic.
Metal or plastic, right? So we talked a little bit about your business, but really you're prototyping and developing product for lots of industry, aerospace, right? Like, can you name some of these too?
Sure. Yeah. The way that I'd put it is that the metaphor is like a general contractor for building a house. The customer, the homeowner, comes to us and says, hey, we want to build a house that looks kind of like this. Maybe they have plans, and it's our job to make those plans come to reality. So we synthesize those different processes together to build the house. So the general contractor might have a couple framers. He takes care of all that and gives you the house at the very end, because the homeowner doesn't have the expertise or the time or the ability to properly manage the subs needed to put the whole thing together. If there's a problem with the house, if the homeowner chooses to go with a GC, they talk to the GC, and maybe it was the electrician, but it's on the GC to figure out what the problem was with the electrical work that was done and get it fixed. And if that homeowner had subbed out the electrical contractor themselves, that electrical contractor might not call them back. They might, they're just up a creek with how to fix this problem. A lot of times because we bring some stuff overseas, if there's an issue with a product that's come from overseas, we can fix it here. And, sometimes the customer knows, sometimes they don't. hopefully they don't. Marrying those two, the domestic, the internal capabilities, the external capabilities with the overseas, helps us provide a unique value proposition to the customer. It's cool. To where they're not getting a shipment of product that's just absolute garbage and they're like, what do we do? You know, they have one neck to wring and it's
you've got the entrepreneurial business owner. You've got that fire inside you. You also have the mechanical engineering fire inside you.
Mm-hmm.
You're 14. You're 14. You're 15. Yep. You're talking to yourself. Or can you think back to, my folks bought me, a Technic set or a Lego set? Or was there a moment inside you, either on, I'd like to ask on both the entrepreneurial side and the mechanical engineering side, was there this click where you went, man, I'm good at this, or man, I love this, or?
Yeah, there was a click as far as the path that I wanted to take. There was the one with sophomore year in college,
right?
Being capable of doing something and actually doing it. And there's another one, and then I have two other things to say before that. First of all, I'm very thankful to my parents for the way that they raised me. I have a belief that how you raise your kids really, especially early on, there's nature and nurture, but I think that the nurture is really important and such like a nebulous thing that we just kind of give up on having any control over it. But whatever my parents did, I really appreciated my childhood. I love the person that I am today. I asked my dad, what were some of the things that you did with me that helped me? One of the qualities I like about myself is that I can go solve a problem and have that drive to figure out the solution and get to something that works quickly. And my dad told me that he never told me what the answer was. He always just said, you know what the right answer is. Do what you know is right. And it made me have that sort of self-reflection on the inside from a very early age. And in hindsight, him saying that, I remember that all the time. Another thing that I've realized in hindsight for all the younger guys and girls out there trying to get into business, the most important thing you can do is get really good at anything you're interested in and everything you're interested in. Go deep, try things, and just get good at stuff. Because if you're not really good at something, there's someone else who probably is, and they're going to understand value propositions way better than you will. And so I would say get as good as you can at anything and get deep knowledge, because without deep knowledge, you don't know how to provide value in a certain space. When I went to school, to college, I did not know what I wanted to do. And I had narrowed it down to, in general, maybe engineering, or in general, maybe business. Not really sure, didn't really have a direction, but those are my two main areas. So I decided to go to school for engineering because it'd be easier to switch to business from engineering than vice versa. I'm proud of myself for that logic back at 18 or whatever. So I went through the first year of freshman year doing general engineering, civil, mechanical, electrical, and still coming out of it, I was like, I don't know what I want to do necessarily. And so I was working construction after freshman year, and I was under this deck, nailing in hog wire, and it's a 4-inch hog wire. It's thick.
Yep.
And with those horseshoe nails, and to guard animals coming into the deck, and the hammer, was hitting the hog wire, and I couldn't get the horseshoe nails in very well. And I had a lot of them to do, and it was just extremely frustrating. And eventually, over the, half day or whatever that I was doing, I totally boiled over and just threw the hammer, and I was cussing up a storm and under this deck. So I wasn't even standing. I was like, it was such a hot emotional moment. And I remember I grew up near the waters and boating. And I remember looking out from under this deck through this hog wire into the bay, and thinking to myself, oh my gosh, in electrical engineering, there's this thing called a solenoid, where if you move magnet through a coil of copper wire, it creates electrical current. If you put a big old solenoid down in the bottom of a boat, and let a magnet roll back and forth while it's at anchor, you could trickle charge your batteries. And then you could run your genset less. And you use that wave motion, the natural motion that the boat's already doing anyway, to generate some electricity for the batteries. And I was like, in that heated emotional moment, that was what I thought of. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go become a mechanical engineer so that I can come up with some sort of innovation and start a business around it. And that was like, just in a 2-second period, that was laid out for me in my mind. It was kind of an epiphany in that moment. And then, so I went to finish out being a mechanical engineer, didn't do anything with business during school. I raced bicycles and did engineering and played music and blah, 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 played. And then I got a job after college at a company called Electro Impact, and that was the perfect job for me.
I think a lot of people think, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is opened your eyes, but like, at least for me personally, how fragile business really is. And it's like people have companies, small, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like, you read in the news, hey, this company's in like talking to so-and-so for debt, really, for whatever. But you realize quickly, like, it's just so fragile.
Oh, it's so
and it's like the economy is fragile. Everything's fragile.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was open to or really aware of that until I started the journey. And then it became more than me. I realized quickly how fragile it really is. And like, good leaders lead, but also they understand how are we gonna navigate these seas when there's like tough times. And there could be great times still. You still got to navigate those issues because too much work is like you were saying, which project do I take on? Too much can be a bad thing as well.
Right. Great conversation. Like, without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, you've talked about not only what the drive within you that is just kind of inherent, but you also talked about individuals who, even if you don't necessarily have that drive, that's something to be ashamed of. You're highly valued. And, I think some folks, we live in a world in Western culture where, granted, sit on a beach, I'm a business owner, and we've kind of shaped our minds around that if you don't have that drive within you, there's something wrong with you. Mm-hmm. But it's beautiful to me that you both spoke to, I just have this, and this is just the way I am. Necessarily don't. I need them, and I value them.
It's not even that I need them. It's that if you think about a society,
right,
you only need a couple weirdos that want to start a company. You only need a couple of those. And not that they're any better or worse. It's just like, you just need a couple. And you need so many more people that are great managers, also great leaders, but maybe not, willing to start a business, because there's a big gap there from being a good leader and being willing to start a business.
Right.
And, the technical guys that advance the science, that's, those people aren't necessarily starting businesses, and someone who's advancing technology, it's like, that is literally just as, if not more, respectable than someone trying to start a business.
Right.
There's space for everybody, and I just lean into who you are and figure out, how you can be of value to the world. Just don't be lazy and build stuff,
Amen.
Let's build stuff. Let's not, be NIMBYs, I think.
Amen. With that, I think that's an exquisite place to end this episode. Once again, we want to thank you, Roald.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a great round. This is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Adios.
Adios.